Alrighty, so for today's video, it's going to be a tier list of all the legendaries coming out in Shadows of the Galaxy. Now I know there's been some talk about how the power level of them isn't very high in this set, and while I don't think it quite matches the power level of the legendaries overall from set 1, I do think there are a lot of cards here that are going to see play. There are also some very unique mechanical cards, mechanically unique cards, I should say, that I think, even though it's unlikely they have large meta presence, do some really interesting and niche things that might make them playable in very specific decks or very specific situations. I'll be going through the 16 cards from 16 all the way down to 1, and let's get right to it. At 16, we've got Endless Legions, the double aspect green 14 cost event that brings everything from your resource row into play. Now, this card costs 14, so obviously it's not meant to be played in all circumstances, right? This would basically only be able to get played in very long attrition-based games where it's supposed to basically say 14 cost win the game. Now, I don't think those situations are going to be all that common, unfortunately. Being in double green also means you lack kind of some of the stall ability that blue offers a lot of decks with like healing and board wipes and stuff like that. You can't play this out of aspect. It just, then it goes to 16 or 18, depending on how much out of aspect you want to play it for. I think this is a cool card. It's probably going to make for some like Wild Twin Sun stuff. There's like a really fringe situation where like you play one of this in like a sideboard for very specific matchups, and it's kind of like a trump card in those matchups. But overall, I think it's a pretty weak legendary and not one that is likely to see very much play. All right, at 15, another double aspect one. This one's double blue. It's the upgrade that you put onto one of your units, and then when that unit dies, you can play it again for free. Now, this card is essentially a 4-cost do nothing when you play it, right? Because it's not impacting the board at all. Your unit stays the exact same power and toughness. I think it's going to be really hard to sequence in such a way where this is good. You need to be able to have initiative in such a way that putting this on a unit that they wanted to kill but couldn't kill prior to you having an opportunity to play this, that opening, that very small window where you can actually stick this onto a unit that absolutely needed to stay alive but couldn't be killed earlier, and is also worth playing 4 resource and do nothing. Right on top of all of that, you're still playing a card that says 4 do not affect the board at all. It doesn't read to me like a control card, which is where double blue typically shines, right? I think unless your plan is to play a giant sentinel that can't get killed, and then you play this on the giant sentinel. Other than that, it's not really a control card. It's more like a mid-rangey value card, and I just don't think that archetype is going to be particularly good, and I don't think this card is going to be particularly powerful. But again, it does something so niche that I think in a specific situation against specific decks, there might be an opening for it to see a little bit of play. All right, at 14, another giant green card. This one's the Finalizer. It's an 11-cost capital ship. It's giant and it's got Overwhelm, so it can close out games. And when played, you're capturing theoretically, right? This is a board, right? Theoretically, you have a few units, they have a few units. You play Finalizer. All your units capture all their units, and then even, if they kill Finalizer, they're still not rescuing their other units. Or if they kill one of your other units, they rescue something there, but the Finalizer stays in play. That's all nice and dandy. It's just that I don't know when those board states happen. They certainly don't happen right now in long, in endgame situations for green. Certainly not ones where a turn earlier playing a Devastator wouldn't have already won you the game, right? Devastator immediately nukes something on the ground or in space, but usually on the ground because it leaves behind a 10-10 Sentinel in space, so you basically lock up an entire arena with its body while also destroying their largest ground unit. It also just closes out games incredibly quickly, right? So why are we wanting to pay 1 more for a card that in many situations is doing something actually worse than Devastator. In some situations, certainly better, but does it need to exist? Is it filling a role that we don't already have from like Avenger Devastator? Is going to 11 having like will we have a bunch of units? I think this is going to be a little niche, but you know, because it does something so dramatic, there is still a chance that just like getting this into play will be able to like be important enough in certain game states. All right, at 13, rule with respect. This is an event. I've seen very little talk about this. I didn't even know it was a legendary when it first got previewed. It's in Green Hero, and it captures, it's another capture legendary. Captures everything that attack. You pick a unit, and it captures everything your opponent used to attack your base that turn. Now, that's cool. For 4 cost, I think it's just going to be tough to sequence. I think if you're going to have to sit there and say like pass, pass, pass over and over again as your opponent hits you in the base 3 times with units and then you capture, that's first of all extremely telegraphed and also potentially dangerous. I think this is going to be like get some people though. This is going to be sneaky. Someone's not going to know it's in your deck. You're going to be like playing an aggro mirror, which is probably where I think this might actually shine the most. Everyone's going base, right? I'm Green Sabine, you're Green Sabine, we're ignoring each other, let's go face. And then, bam, rule with respect, you steal their K2, you steal their Fleet Lieutenant that attacked you the previous turn, you put them under your whatever, and you probably win the game. Because even if they manage to free those units, they'll come into play exhausted on your opponent's side, and you basically, you're likely just to walk over them at that point. Because of that, I think this card is not complete waste of space, but I don't think it's going to be like some mid-range savior against aggro. It's not like aggro goes so wide that it's just attacking you with a ton of units. It's not going to capture their leader, which is obviously like nothing ever does that to leaders, but it's a big issue with the card too, is that the most important unit that your opponent has typically will be the leader, and this doesn't work against it. All right, at number 12, another double aspect legendary. So I think all of the 3 double aspect legendaries we got are all extremely niche and unlikely to make major dents in the meta. This one is Final Showdown, the yellow one. It costs 6. It says ready each unit you control, and then at the start of the regroup phase, you lose the game. So you ready everything, and you have to immediately win with whatever you readied. Otherwise, you will lose. I think at 6 cost, it's just way too fringe. Effect like this needs to be a little cheaper. You're basically all in, except it's going to be hard to squeeze this in while also playing other units because of how expensive it is. So the units that you want to ready need to have been played the previous turn. They all need to attack the current turn, and then enough of them need to survive so that readying with them will then defeat your opponent. We usually at double yellow, the first place we look is Boba, and maybe like with Cunning, potentially readying 2 resources and getting a big buff on Boba, right? You can turn him into an 8 power unit. The Cunning costs 4, but it readies 2, so then it's kind of like it costs 2, so you need 8. So if you can go like Cunning your Boba, when you have 8 resources, you can hit for 8. Maybe one other unit can squeeze in, and then you do the Final Showdown, you get a couple more attacks. At best, I think this will be a sideboard card, and maybe just having it in the sideboard is going to horrify people, or in the main deck for that matter, horrify people so much that they're just like so scared of doing anything while you have 6 resources up that you just kind of get some mind game equity from it. All right, at 11, we've got Rey. So Rey is a 4/7 for 5. She's got good stats. She does like a small-ish ability, right, with the heal. I think the shielding is strong, but that will only work if you stick her in a Kylo deck for the most part. Again, she can shield non-hero units in a hero deck, so it's not like it completely bricks. Overall, though, she's just stats on a stick, and stats on a stick, it's not typically good enough unless paired with Energy Conversion Lab, and I just don't think she's a particularly good pair with Energy Conversion Lab. Like, there's way better things to ambush with. So I will still stick to my theory. Once you're at 5 cost or more, your units need to do something way more impactful when they're played. or they need to be absolute haymakers when they are ambushed with Energy Conversion Lab. Otherwise, they are not worth slots in your deck. And I don't think Rey crosses those two barriers, but she has a little bit of upside having the Force trait. She has some upside that you can play her in a Kylo villain deck, and a little bit of upside in that she can be played as a 4-cost in the new Han deck and be a 4/5 that will then heal herself. So it's not a bad card. It's got good stats. If we enter a world where good stats is enough, Rey obviously gets more points in that kind of place. And, well, we're talking about good stats, so we're going to 10, and I think Kylo's the better card between the two, but it suffers for basically all the same problems. So he's a 6/7 for 6. He does the thing where like he'll give an experience to non-villain units, so that triggers much more often if you play him in a Rey deck, but can also trigger against some stuff in a villain deck that doesn't have the villainous aspect. Why I think he's better is that he's simply just a better Energy Conversion Lab target because he can give himself the buff when he attacks, meaning he ambushes for 8, which is not something we've seen at 6 cost, I don't believe, which, you know, it from 7 to 8 matters against like Darth Vader, so he can one-shot a Darth Vader. I don't know if there's that many other situations where going from 7 to 8 matters that much, but he's got that going for him. Again, he's got good stats. It's just that good stats has not yet proven to be enough to make cards playable and constructed. All right, number 9. Mandalorian, 5/6 Sentinel. When played, gives a tiny guy 2 shields. So this is... So Blue Hero has 1 billion Sentinels that it can play. I think Mandalorian might now be the best one they can do at 6. Having 5 power instead of Obi-Wan's 4 or Bendu's 4 is pretty important because of Cunning being a popular card and being able to bounce those 2 units. You basically immediately lose the game if your Obi-Wan gets cunninged and Mandalorian can't get cunninged. Sentinel, in my mind, is an immediate impact. So, like, this is... At 6 cost, you are getting immediate board presence, right? Sentinel is a very valuable thing. There's nothing really flashy about this card. I think it's in contention with all these other, like, big-bodied Sentinels. He might just do it a little better than the ones we've previously had access to. Yeah, like, the bonus from the shields is cool. Probably matters more in maybe like a Rey deck where you are buffing your low-cost units and you might have one that's actually particularly valuable. But any unit that you can throw 2 shields on means that unit is probably going to be invincible for a very long time. So it's a nice little upside. Not as much as an upside as Obi has with the 2 experience and potential draw card when it dies. But the fact that this has 5 power, I think, is quite important. And I could see Mandalorian seeing some play because of that. At 8, I got Dryden Voss. He is a 7-cost villain cunning card. You know, he's got the shield, so that's nice for his body. And he does the whole steal a captured unit permanently thing. You actually get to play it, which means any when played effects will trigger. Now, Dryden, I think, slots into basically one archetype, and he will either be good there because the archetype is good, or he won't, and he won't see much play. But I think mostly that would be a Jabba yellow deck, because Jabba gives you a free capture with his leader side, meaning it's going to be much easier to set up a Dryden because of that. I think outside of that, it might be a little too tricky to set him up, although there is some potential with the card Relentless Pursuit, which is also in yellow, and Shields a Bounty Hunter, meaning your opponent will be less likely to be able to free that captured unit. So when this triggers, it's immensely impactful. You get to permanently steal a unit from your opponent that you had removed. The thing is, the opponent's unit has already been removed from the board when Dryden is in play, so it's not like you're further killing another thing. You've already theoretically killed the unit that it's stealing, but depending on what it is, that could when it permanently captures, permanently plays that unit, that could be incredibly board impacting and like can kind of roll over a game. So because Jabba gives you that free capture, I bumped Dryden up a little bit. I'd like to see a deck like that thrive. I still have my doubts that it will be able to compete with aggro decks, but as like a mid-rangey green-yellow deck, there is some potential. and Dryden is pretty appealing in that kind of shell. All right, at 7, got DJ, the last legendary that was previewed. He is a 3-cost 3/5 Underworld, so assuming nothing else, that's already a pretty high floor. Now 3/5 became a little less special in set 2 with the addition of cards like Cassian Andor and Toro, and even like the textless yellow hero 3/5 with like 14 traits on it. But DJ's better than some of these cards, and certainly has a really impactful smuggle ability if it's able to be pulled off. It is in double cunning. It costs 7, which is a lot, but stealing an opponent's resource is crazy. It's going to, I think, get some people and kind of derail turns, which might end up derailing games for some opponents that you have. I think that steal, when paired with like proper timing, when, for instance, right before an opponent is about to play a super laser blast for 8, or right before your opponent's gonna like deploy flip Vader or deploy flip Palpatine, right? This can stop a leader deploy when you steal a resource. I think that's pretty strong. I think because the floor on this is so high as just a 3/5 for 3, I could see basically any double yellow deck just slotting it in and having this like really, really strong ability that might steal some games, right? I don't think it's going to come up that often, but I think there's at times it will come up and it will just straight up win a game because of that. The Underworld thing on top of that is also pretty nice in a Cad Bane deck, so even if Cad is not playing double yellow, I think you might just play this over a different 3-drop that wouldn't have been Underworld. All right, at 6, another yellow card is Evacuate. It's the 6-cost Super Waylay, right? It's bouncing every non-leader, yours and theirs, but, you know, this is going to slot into the decks that don't play a lot of units. I think it's a pretty easy slot into, like, the blue-yellow control decks that we saw prop up towards the end of Set 1's lifespan. That was notably blue-yellow Boba, but it might branch into some more archetypes. We'll look at other leaders to fill that role. But basically, this is a really good bridge card in those decks. It's an amazing stall card. It will bridge you to your Super Laser Blast if needed. It costing 6 is not crazy expensive. In a Boba deck, when you play this, you actually ready a resource. If you've stalled your deploy, you can then play Boba and ready 2 more resources, basically giving you another 3 to play with that turn. I think that's going to be a pretty strong line, just delaying your Boba deploy after an Evacuate. I like this card. I think it's going to be pretty impactful. All right, at 5, Kylo's TIE Silencer. This is a 3/2 for 2 in space with no downside. It actually has a little bit of upside, mostly in a Kylo deck, but also against like some random discard effects that may prop up. It's just strong. The floor here is high. There's nothing particularly flashy about this. I think even if it was textless, it'd be pretty good. Now, we were given a couple other 3/2 ships, like the Mercenary Gunship, and there's a red one that I don't remember the name, but it has a negative bounty on it. But Kylo's TIE is the only one that has no built-in downside into it, and as such, we'll probably see the most play out of any of those. Again, nothing flashy here. It's just a good card, and a 2-cost 3/2 space unit is a useful tool against aggro and a useful tool in aggressive decks. So prepare to see this across the table a decent amount. All right, at 4, Crate Dragon. So this at first just seemed like a giant, fun, like Twin Suns clunker, but I don't think it's that at all. It's a 9-cost 10/10 Overwhelm, so, you know, that's expensive. But its effect, I think, is going to have major implications, especially against controlled decks. The fact that any card your opponent plays is representing direct base damage, even if this gets immediately killed by whatever card that is, which will usually cost at least 4, if not more, is important. This will give you reach. This will also just kind of close out ground wars if you're ever in like that kind of game state, right? Because once this is in play, your opponent basically can't play ground units anymore because it just eats them. But mostly, I think this is going to be an important tool for red decks. into the control archetype. There's going to be more burn in general running around, more direct base damage. There's actually more discard too, so there's going to be a few ways to target control decks. I just think this will be quite a good one, and the fact that this costs 8 in the new Han deck, right? It comes in as a 10/8. Who cares? That's going to be pretty strong, and I think Crate Dragon is going to see a decent amount of play. All right, at 3, Supreme Leader Snoke, another big guy. This one's an 8 cost 6/6 that shrinks everything on your opponent's side for -2/2. So I think this guy is quite solid. This fits a nice curve in the villain blue control decks, like especially the green ones that want to play like Vader first, then have usually gone into like things like Reinforcement Walker and then Avenger. Well, Snoke is a perfect card to play before Avenger, as it will clean up all the junk. It gets through pesky shields that like 7th Fleet Defender and Crafty Smuggler have. And that shrink effect is going to save you damage even if it doesn't kill whatever is in play. So a lot of the times when we played Reinforcement Walker, we were just doing it because we wanted to gain 3 life and then, gain 3 life again, but we were still going to be taking damage from whatever's in play. This is not gaining life, but it is mitigating damage, which is in a sense gaining life, right? I think if this stays in play, your opponent is basically not going to be able to effectively play more units into you, right? Everything is going to be small. Oh, you played this and I have Darth Vader. Well, my Darth Vader now ambushes for 3. He's a little weenie. It's not that scary anymore. I'm going to play Millennium Falcon after this, right? Like, you're trying to close out a game against Sabine, and bam, they just basically can't deal damage to you with units anymore. That seems good. I just think this is going to be pretty impactful. It doesn't look too flashy. The body isn't amazing, but -2/2 permanent. This is going to demand an answer, or it's going to just shut the door on a lot of games. All right, number 2, Dark Saber. A giant upgrade that gives +4/+3 that can be played out of aspect on Mandalorians, and also has a little buff to Mandalorians. Mainly this is so high because of how absurd I think it's going to be in Sabine. She's a Mandalorian, so you can play this in any Sabine deck. This is going to ask a very specific question to basically anyone playing the game. Can you defeat or handle a 6/8 Sabine on turn 3 before she hits you twice, right? I think if you take the 7 once from her, remember it's 6 plus her 1 ping, and then defeat her, that might be okay because you're basically defeating a leader plus a 4 drop. But if she is allowed to hit you twice and you take 14 from this on a Sabine, I don't think you're winning that game. And as such, you have to be prepared to handle this card on a Sabine. I don't think it'll be too hard to get this equipped on her. Wing Leader has been a staple in Sabine decks from the start, has never been something that was too challenging to set up, right? Sabine decks tend to have more units in play. She has an activated ability that she can use to delay an action. So Wing Leader, getting her buffed by Wing Leader was always possible. This is going to play out similarly. It's basically a Wing Leader on steroids. It's going to be more difficult to keep this, because Wing Leader protects Sabine from Power of the Dark Side. It might be a little harder into Power of the Dark Side decks to use this. But again, I think this is going to ask a very important question from your brews. Can you handle a Dark Saber Sabine? Because if you can't, back to the drawing board on those brews. And number 1 is Poe Damron. So this is a really good unit. He's a 5 cost 6/6, and it's like really pushing on my tolerance for how good does a unit need to be before it not having an immediate board impact is okay. And I think he hit it. I think him having 6 health really pushed that theory. On top of that, this guy's absolutely crazy when you use Energy Conversion Lab with him. So I think he's going to get paired with that base a lot. We also have Timely Reinforcements, the new event that gives units ambush. So I can see a lot of Poe ambush green decks around, but I think he could also see some play outside of green just because, it's going to be hard to kill him. Both Hans can get him out a turn earlier. One will get him into play with 4 health, but, you know, we've played 4 health 4 drops a lot, and they've been quite decent, like K2. And older Han can get him into play a turn earlier with the full 6 health. So both of those, I think, can very much look at trying to jam some Poe Damron. And all the abilities are good. This guy can ambush for 8 because of the deal 2 on attack trigger. Defeating upgrades is going to be pretty key in some situations, right? Think about a mirror that we just talked about, playing Sabine Greens. They play a Dark Saber. Next turn, you ambush Poe. You kill something. You blow up their Dark Saber. You're in business. I do think Poe is probably the best legendary in this set. We'll probably see the most widespread play. And he is legit. All right, that's it. That's my 16 legends, their ranks, and a little bit of my analysis on them. Hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, take care. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.